This is Critical Nonsense, our high-lowbrow show about culture, science, and tech. This week, Aaron's back, and he's asking Joey and me about fear.
Woo! Hold me closer, Aaron Powers. This is what a Joey sounds like, and...
Joey and Jess bouncing here and there, and they're so great. I haven't warmed up in a long time. It's been like 2 months. That's my way of saying that I love you like Gummy loves bears. Hello, this is what an Aaron sounds like.
And this is what an executive producer and tiny dancer, Jess Vander, sounds like.
Hi, this is Jess.
I want to call
Welcome back, Aaron.
Yeah, do you see how I just jump over I knew that someone was going to welcome me back. And I'm like, I don't...
And you were like, no.
I can't. No, none of that. No, but I love how much Elton slaps. Okay, all right, let's keep potting. I'm sorry, that was unnecessary.
Elton slaps?
Aaron, in an overlap of things you love, one, we should address the fact that Demi Adejuyigbe did not do September 21st video this year that I'm aware of.
Oh, yeah.
Sad.
Oh, my shirt will still go reworn.
But he does have his pinned tweet is him standing in tiny clothes in the bathroom as the Tiny Dancer song plays. And when it gets to the hook, it just says, "Hold me close, so tiny, damn son," written on the mirror in his bathroom while he's just wearing like clothes that are too small for him.
There's God, yes.
Just so you know, Joey has been holding on to this niche reference for so long until this moment where he could share it with you.
I know that.
And it's really something special.
I welcome
this feeling of not knowing what the heck you're talking about. It has returned so quickly.
Hold me close, so tiny, damn son.
You know, and also like them clothes be small. Like clothes when they're small, they be tiny. They be very tiny.
Damn son.
Damn son. Potting. This isn't how the show normally starts. I'm sorry.
We just missed each other so much.
We just missed this. We really did.
We did. Are there do we usually start with housekeeping and then we don't have any? Is that pretty much what we do?
Yeah. Send emails to criticalnonsense@sylvain.co about anything. Send pictures of you in tiny clothes.
Yes.
See, why did it have to sound like that?
That did sound kind of funny. But like it could be a tiny glove. It could be a tiny glove. It can be a very, very confusingly itty bitty boot. Like you can be creative, my friends. Finger socks. Throw some teeny finger socks on. Yes.
Yeah, I was not specifically asking. Think full-sized clothes that just don't belong on you. Not scantily clad.
Keep going. Don't stop.
I don't want your scantily clad photos.
Yep, there we go.
I want you in clothing for toddlers.
Nope.
The answer is not more.
Nope.
The answer is not more.
No. The answer maybe is to stop here.
So not only is our house confused, but I think we can say it's clean. Yeah.
I would say it's clean.
No, I think I
would say it's clean.
dirtied the house.
Soiled
Maybe
everywhere.
just do your laundry and
messed it up.
move
Don't
on.
mess the house, Joey.
Donate your old clothes.
Yes.
Okay. Folks, Aaron,
Yeah.
you're back.
I'm back.
Are you back with some thoughts?
So let's see. I have 4 months of thoughts since I've been errantly involved in the podcast for the past year. But I do have one thing that is on top of mind. And y'all know
It's going to be small, not significant. It'll
will have
just like
it'll have a collar and it might have sweater structure because it's tiny clothes. See, I spun around on it. I leapfrogged and then back to the
tiny clothes.
Tiny clothes. Ja, ja, ja. So, you guys know that I am a Halloween Grinch. I'm not a fan of this quote holiday. I bristle at the phrase spooky season. It fills me with a small sense of
I was about to say that's this here spooky season.
It's like, because
what do you wish it were?
I wish it didn't exist. I wish it were nothing.
Got it.
Yeah,
cool.
how's
Great.
that?
Good.
Is that okay?
Good.
I think that's the thing. But you know, just like the Grinch's heart like grew back 3 sizes larger or whatever. I'm sure that's how it went. Thanks, Boris.
Grew 3 sizes that day.
Thank you. What I think is that mine is starting to grow back. My pumpkin heart is growing just a little bit larger. So, I bought my first Stephen King book, and
you bought it at a Barnes & Noble with a Starbucks and got a
pumpkin spice
latte.
I will never go down that road. I don't believe, maybe never say never, but pumpkin spice won't be in my future. Pshaw! But I did specifically get Night Shift because it's a collection of short stories. And I've always wanted to read Stephen King. I just don't like scary stuff. It's not for me. And like, I think that this is kind of, it's at least a popular Black thing to say that like life is scary enough every day. We don't need to skydive. We don't need like horror movies necessarily. Like everything is scary enough as it is. So we don't need all that. But maybe I've like ingested that over the years. So I decided, let me give Stephen King a real try. Let me not go big with like one of the big books. And I've only read Salem's Lot so far. Made it through 1. It's about 15 pages, so look at me. But what I was very, very surprised about is that I was delighted. It's such a wonderful experience to sort of face scary paranormal things and to get lost in a world that actually does feel incredibly dissimilar to our own. And then on top of that, it's fun, given a lot that's been going on in my personal life, to feel delight in fear, where so much of the fear has been existential for the past 6 months. Most listeners, I'm sorry that you're not going to know what I'm talking about, but but it's okay. We'll save that for another time. So in any case, as I finished Salem's Lot and I've started Graveyard Shift, which is the next short story, a big question writ large on my head, which is, what can we learn to love about fear?
Boo. Did it work? It didn't work.
I'm sorry. I was drinking water and I was going to spit it on Rufio and on the computer. It was a bad time, but I'm afraid, and I learned something from it.
I think it's there's probably a lot of things, right? Like there's sort of like the introspective part of it, of like, what are you afraid of and what does it say about you? Like there is that side, but there's also, as you were talking, it was making me think about the sort of catharsis of being able to externally look at, I guess, both things that maybe you are specifically afraid of, but that you feel like you can create a safe distance, right? Like there's sort of like obvious emotional catharsis in a lot of any type of entertainment that we consume, right? Like comedies are about like seeing situations that you wouldn't want to actually be in yourself, but are funny from the outside. Same with dramas and things like that. And horror inevitably is that as well. I think the fear component of it just depends on like, can you get it in a format that fits with you? I've never read scary, but you saying that, because I'm also like, I don't want to watch movies with just like jump takes. I'm like, I just get an adrenaline dump, and I was not enjoying that. But I'm like, like maybe reading it would be in sort of like a format where I could still get that at the appropriate distance for myself.
That was why I started reading it, because I hate jump scares. And I've, like intellectually, I've heard that horror is the most like underappreciated genre, and like in film, and like horror movies don't ever win Academy Awards and all that stuff. But increasingly we're remembering what Night of the Living Dead taught us, which is that horror is a really, really fantastic mechanism to explore humanity. And it, like, all the major horror franchises are the good ones. I think the effective ones are built on that. But again, that's my intellectual side. I don't want to have that adrenaline rush of a boo. And the thing about reading horror that I'm starting to appreciate is that you're forced to identify and immerse yourself in the character's psyche when it's well written in a way that you're not expected to and that you can't necessarily in film. Like, film is a spectator sport. Reading, you have to imagine. The words make you construct the universe and understand the motivations.
Yeah, and I feel like that, to me, is the piece that gets under the skin of, like, the different types of things to love, which is, it starts in what is why is it scary? Like, if you have to be immersed in that psyche, it's like, I have to understand why this character is so scared, and therefore, or is why is this like a scary scenario? And that is where, like, when you use the word delight earlier, it's so interesting because to me, like, the only space that delight can emerge is that fine line of where the unknown becomes thrilling, right? Like, there's like where the unknown can take a very dark turn, or it can create that sort of like thrilling excitement, and that can only come from a place of like just like like being able to understand enough, but not too much. A couple other things that come to mind too are like, if the thing that is driving your fear is existential, say, like, the thing that could be good out of that is a kind of urgency created, you know, like, can that fear have the positive of pushing something that otherwise didn't have enough activation energy? That also could be like, could the reason that you're scared be because you might not be able to achieve your goals, but if you don't try, like, are you pushing yourself? Like, it depends on the source of the fear, I guess. And that is really interesting to me.
That I love that that horror can teach you the foolishness of fear and the foolishness of worry. Like, that there are times when there are things, I feel like watching someone else go through something, regardless of whether it's film or books or whatever, you're kind of tickles your mind. You're like, what would I do if I were in that situation? And then when I've stepped out of it, then it's like, oh, that's silly. Like, it's scary. It's silly to be scary about either how extreme that circumstance was, because that the likelihood of that happening is very, very slim to none. Or it's really interesting to understand where my fear is actually coming from, seeing it in a different type of scenario. Like, maybe my fear of, being too close to people or something like that. That's surprisingly not a fear of mine, even though it might not seem to be true. You might like learn a new dimension that you can apply to your own experience. And I think the fact that fear absent the genre of horror, being able to face fears, being able to navigate fears, swim in fears, forces you to realize that there's a superficial layer of them, and then there's what's really going on 2 or 3 levels below. And we're usually most scared of the superficial layer, because that's what drives the adrenaline response, and that's what we steer away from. That's the aversive stimulus that we need to then stay away from. But then if we just go like 2 or 3 steps further into why, I love the universe that it sort of opens up. And that part is less scary, because that's where it starts to turn into action and agency.
Heroic.
And yes, it becomes super, you become the hero. That's totally it. There's like this like scheme that you have to go through. And then all of a sudden you go from being the victim of Home Alone to the victor of, I would land this so well if I remembered the horror movie that it's based off of. If you give me 30 seconds, I'll come back and interrupt one of you with the name of it. Yeah.
Oh, okay. I was just going to paint the picture of like the ornaments in the feet, like the like stepping on the ornaments is like one of the most visceral ones for me. Like, you can just like feel your toes a tingling just thinking about it. I don't know if that was I did not know that Home Alone was based on a horror film.
Well,
But that could be it.
it's very close. It's Your Next. I could not remember why I was going there, but for anyone that's seen Your Next, you know exactly what I'm talking about. For everyone else, you're lost in the dark, but I love you.
I mean, it's so there's I like as we're going through this, right? I feel like there's a version of horror that we talk about that is sort of associated with sort of campy B movies from the 70s, and many more horror movies have been created since then. But I was like, what is the definition of this? Because I feel like maybe I'm flattening it too far in my head. Like I'm flattening the concept into like, there's someone in the house, or like run, like we all don't want to be eaten, or we all don't want to be murdered. Like it's sort of like an obvious
I want to watch the version of the movie that's all those things.
and they, as from the other podcast, they just say, run, as they're running.
Yes.
They go, run.
I love it. Yeah, I mean, I don't have.
So I looked up the definition, it is a genre of fiction whose purpose is to create feelings of fear, dread, repulsion, and terror in the audience. And I realized the reason I haven't watched Breaking Bad is because it, for me, is horror.
Yes.
Like it fits into my like fears or areas of discomfort in which like I can't do it because that's horror to me.
Well, it's funny you bring that up because in the 90s there was a really big renaissance in slasher horror movies. That's when the I Know What You Did Last Summer series grew up, Scream really blew up. And there was a big gap because before that you had Halloween and whatnot in the 70s, but then there was this trough in the 80s. And certain not sociologists, we'll call them armchair sociologists and culture critics, point out the fact that audiences were willing to go to the theaters to explore those sorts of themes because we as a country, and actually on a global scale, tended to be more safe and economically grounded than we had been in a very long time. And this sort of macro sense of safety allowed for people to find delight in dread, to find delight in this idea that, home invasion can be a farce that I go and pay money to have the wits scared out of me. Because specifically when I leave the theater, I sort of know that it's not going to happen to me. So it becomes a roller coaster instead of becoming this psychological, like this instilled dread that you carry with you. Now, if you're 14-year-old me and you see Scream 2, you hold on to that psychological dread for about another 20 years or more. But these periods of psychological safety, as we look at how different people are sort of reacting to us wading through whatever phase of the pandemic we're in. And like, who knows what this winter is going to have and how that's going to play out. But there is a greater sense of safety right now than perhaps there was certainly 2 years ago. And so we're actually seeing more horror movies like showing up and showing out this Halloween season than we have the past few years.
Yeah, I mean, it's interesting to sort of extend that conceit in the opposite direction into like things that we've spoken about or like get brought up a lot in culture without that same context, maybe, right? Like there were however many bajillion like think pieces or Vulture articles or whatever about like Gen Z loves Friends, right?
Yes.
Like, but when you start to add some of that additional context of like, increasingly being pointed to because of the impact of social media on teens, like the level of anxiety, depression, things like that are currently being felt by, everyone, but in particular that age cohort, like turning to something that is as innocuous as Friends, even if they're like, it's not great, but like it's fun and I get to be transported, whatever. But like watching a thing that like doesn't have long story arcs is like safe. Everyone makes up at the end, like Will, Ross, and Rachel. I don't know, like like that is like the flip side of, do teens want horror right now when they're sort of immersed in those emotions?
Yeah, and I mean, it reminds me. We actually had a conversation a few years ago with cultural astrologer Ose Kwache about like the future of horror as a genre, and I think it was grappling with some of these ideas that it's really interesting to think about where they've come from since that time before the pandemic, and we had that talk like that we're maybe in still a similar kind of a boat where what kinds of fear are pleasant or, lovable, at least from like the commercial or the entertainment space, is still like a tumultuous journey.
It's so funny watching Smile like crush the box office and Barbarian do incredibly well. And for all of its faults. So Bros, just to sidestep for a second, Bros came out last weekend with Billy Eichner and first major studio gay rom-com, and it did really bad. It did not do well at all. It made like $4 million at the box office, which is 4.6 maybe. And yes, there's one thing that's about like, why are we releasing a rom-com in Halloween season? And like, spoiler alert, the top 3 movies that beat it at the box office were all horror movies. So there's that. But then each one of those horror movies is being sold as you don't quite know what's wrong, but something's wrong. So like actual content of the film aside, thinking about the way they're being marketed, if you look at slasher movies, it's very clear from the commercials what is going to happen. Someone will
Gore
be chased.
And death.
Slashing
in
and
like
death.
horrible ways.
And then like we got to a point where it was like, okay, we're going to flip the script and all of the people being like chased down are going to fight back. And like, just for what it's worth, put Jamie Lee Curtis in everything. All the time. I don't care what it is. She's awesome.
Always.
She's just everything.
Yep.
But then you see this other group of horror movies that, yes, are running off the success of Nope, and before that, why is my
Get
brain
Out?
blanket? Get Out, thank you. There's my brain. My brain is Jess.
Us also.
And Us, yes. So basically his entire oeuvre, but all those are based in like, there's something that we know we're going to talk about, but everything is kind of off. And there's like a thing that you have to see to believe. And that's how all 3 of those movies are being marketed.
This is what's interesting is maybe that there's more delight now in like a subtle kind of fear. Like just a discomfort is enough because there's plenty of horror abound and trauma abound. Is like, how about this uncomfortable situation that makes you think like something is about to go down, but like it's not happening, but it makes me feel weird, and that's great. That's a tickle.
There's something off of what you said too in the thing that I had pulled up to find like the genre definition. It talks about the etymology, and it says it comes from the Old French aurore, meaning to shuttle or to shudder or to bristle. And what's interesting to me is those are very different emotional reactions to me.
Yeah, me too.
Like to shudder or to bristle is like one is sort of like a like this tightening, and one is like this involuntary like quake. And you talking about that is like it feels like we're in more of like the bristle zone with like the Jordan Peele types of things, where it like, yes, it may be scarier if someone gets slashed or whatever, but that's like not really the point of it. It is like the confrontation of like some sort of social idea that people understand and have experience and are being delivered that message through, like metaphor and analogy, but is like creating a different reaction than like seeing someone's head explode or their like heart being ripped out of their chest or something, which is more in that like shuddering space.
It is like you've got like when you say that, I hear, and I'm pulling kind of both of what you just said together. There's this little concoction of like unease where like things are just like, I don't feel settled. I feel unsettled and I don't like, and it's almost like it's not positive or negative. It's just like my feet aren't on the ground. That plus dread, which is in that definition. There's like, I'm uneasy, but also shit's gonna be bad. All I know.
I know it's not going right, but I don't know why.
Exactly. And then and maybe this is going too far, but I feel like the use of all these stories as meta narratives to what's going on socially or politically as well is where we get to the more like physical reaction of like the bristling, like reacting to the fact that like there is a stimulus that is making me uncomfortable in my own unease. Like that dread isn't just impending, it's actually impacting my physicality, my physical response. And why that is, and that's where I like also come back to basically what you said, Joey, which is like, I will never be someone who finds delight in that part. I will never be able to drink that cocktail, but I will be able to explore each of those ideas. Like I'll be able to like maybe face the dread briefly so that maybe I don't shudder.
Oh my God, this is what you're making me think of. Like, are we just like frogs boiling ourselves? Where like most of the things out there are so overwhelming. We're like, nope, not looking at that. But this is like, it's just enough of a low simmer where you're like, okay, I guess I'm tolerating this.
Yes.
Should I turn it off? No, I kind of okay.
What I love about it too, you're tickling my brain here, Jess. There's so many things that we engage with on a daily basis that are like quick hits. Like when we read news collectively, it's like headline skimming. Who's reading the full articles? When we're tweets. I mean, everything is like tight TikTok, short bursts. Horror is something that the effects of it get better the more that you stew in it. So it justifies movie length.
My God, horror is a stew?
Horror is a stew, and it's a stew that you yourself want to sit in. Caloror, there's potatoes in my stew, and my foot is the potato.
And the starch is my foot.
Thank you. Always add just a little bit of starch or blend some beans into your stew, and you just get more vegetables and more of a like thickness. Yeah, it's wonderful. Good. So yeah, I think that's something you can learn is how to stew.
I watched Legion while I was on vacation, it's like apparently a Marvel comic that was like not sort of integrated into the mainstream, like stream being pathway, not like mainstream media. But it wasn't part of like the main connected Avengers, whatever world of Marvel. And I had totally missed that this had come out. But I was in Europe and like my family was asleep and I'm like, I'm not tired. I'm going to watch something. And that was available on Disney Plus in Europe. And I was like, okay, I'll watch this. And the fact that, first of all, so good, wasn't expecting it. Second of all, the sort of slightly fantasy, for lack of a better term, aspect of it, where it could still be horror, but just like not real life, made it much more palatable. I don't know if you ever watched Utopia, the BBC show. I think they recreated it in the US recently, but I never saw that one. But it's like sort of magical realism. Like there's just enough of like not real where I was like, okay, I can watch this. It's beautiful. And like, it doesn't feel like real life. Like, so where your tolerances in these things lie is like interesting. Like what is going to be the thing that like, if you pull one thing out, you can have like the rest of the aspect of the genre. Like Legion is like really intense in the sort of psychological components of it. Also FX, like FX is like kind of on like pumping out a lot of bangers.
They go through strong waves. Love them.
Like Old Man, The Bear, Legion. There's other ones that I'm not thinking of, but like people are like, yes, these are very good. But like that idea of like just pull one thing out, I can do it, but it's in like the cell or that like psychological horror realm. And I'm like, all right, yeah, let's go.
So to that point, and maybe this is where we leave this delightful horrifying jaunt. I do recommend Salem's Lot to you, Joey, specifically because as someone who's read one horror story of 15 pages and therefore will say that it's the best of the whole genre, it does a lot of what you're saying. It's got a really, really simple, clever device. And I hope that it taught me that it's really fun to read something that as you're reading, you can't wait to get to the next sentence or the next line. Like, it's been years since I've read something like that. But once you build the world, once you're getting into it, I literally was like, damn it, eyes, please move to the next word faster because I want to know what's happening. It's that kind of thing.
Yeah.
It's so good. Highly recommend for you. It's also a quick read. So, yeah, that's what I got. Take Aaron's recommendation of the one short horror story.
Yeah. Aaron, have you ever read like Raymond Carver or Tobias Wolff short stories?
I cannot say that I have. Near.
They're like the great American short story, like second half of the century short story writers among them. But it's like a similar feeling of like writing short stories. You got to like hit that punch quick and like heavy. It's like a sledgehammer versus like a slow build of something. And those things there are just like, there's a lot there. So, I mean, I don't know. I don't feel great about haunted houses, usually because you can find yourself running upstairs, closing a room to a door to a room, and then finding yourself in a corner. Like this wrap-up corner. Everyone saw that coming from the beginning of it, right? Everyone saw it when I just started talking about the haunted house?
We saw it.
Okay, that's fair.
We saw it.
So this is just
feel like
wonderful.
We really felt our way around all of the different dark edges of what fear brings and why we reach for it, from the delights of what you don't know to the gentle, superficial surface fear of something that isn't real for you in, your day-to-day, but can sort of tickle your fancy just for a fleeting moment. Horror that's specific to you and the things that haunt you maybe is something you're steering clear of, whereas something that holds your feet to the fire just long enough actually does the trick. I don't know. I think that, Aaron, at the end of the day, we've just seen your pumpkin heart go from decorative gourd to pie pumpkin. And I am here. I'm here for this journey.
Let us all have pie.
Let us be gourds
Let us
together.
be gourds together.
Critical Nonsense is a Sylvain production.
Brought to you by Gourds and Stuff, the place where you get your pumpkins and nobody else's. But it's full of stuff.
As always, we'd like to thank executive producer and Pumpkins Are Berries, Jess Vander.
Sound engineer and proud papa, Alex Contel.
We'd like to thank our programming coordinator and manager and executive, Les Jacobs. Otilio!
Yes. We'd also like to thank the production help that we get from really the Scooby gang of Sarah Gilbert and Nora Mestrich.
And as always, Thank you, Alen.
Thank you.
Special thanks to the Jacksonville newscaster who did not want to be in a haunted house and went through it and is hilarious, and we'll put it in the show notes.
I want to thank my friend Andrew. When in first grade, he's the only person who, when my parents set up a haunted house tour for me for my birthday, also screamed and cried so that we could get out of having to go through it. I love you, Andrew. Thank you.
Special thanks to Screaming and Crying.
Spoiler alert,
wonders.
my mom set it up when we were 35. So, sorry. That's basically what happened.
It was
literally last week. I've got more. I'm going to do a quick slew of special thanks. First special thanks is to y'all for supporting me through everything. You guys, and I'm talking about Joey and Jess here, not you, the listener. We'll get to you in a little bit, listeners. But thank you, Joey and Jess. I love you guys, and I really, really genuinely appreciate you both, period. And listeners, thanks y'all too for coming back.
Hold me closer, Aaron Powers.
I will squeeze very hard. I don't know the power of my own strength. But I also want to thank just a ton of media that I absorbed while I was gone, and I recommend it to everybody. So, the memoirs of Viola Davis, Jennifer Lewis, Trevor Noah, and Colton Haynes. Recommend all of those. I don't recommend Men in Black's 1, 2, 3, and International. They're all trash. I also don't recommend the sequel to Sonic the Hedgehog. Really trash, great for kids though, so like, you know, Jim Carrey, your mileage may vary. Video games, Ghost of Tsushima, you must play that game. It might be the best game ever made. Horizon Forbidden West. There it is. Amazing.
Oh.
The sequel. It's going to be a film series on HBO Max or a TV show pretty soon, so you might as well start playing it now. The Last of Us Parts 1 and 2. Amazing pieces of storytelling and horror and video game fantasticness. If you haven't played them, they just remastered Last of Us Part 1 very recently for PS5. It's worth playing, even if you've played it already. It's great. And
it's
also
now going to be like a show or something?
Yes, they are coming out on HBO Max in January in 2023. I'm extremely excited as a deep fan of the franchise. So please go and enjoy and learn something about relationships, because that, my friends, is what the horror of Last of Us is all about. That's all of my special thanks. Rapid fire.
The friends we didn't murder along the way.
Yeah, that's it. That is it. That's it. Ooh. And if y'all want to talk about it,
with that,
email me.
With that, we love you. Bye.
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 Let us be gourds together. That's really weird.
Yeah. It's kind of like, have you guys seen Everything Everywhere?
I watched it this week.
Joey, have you seen it?
I haven't. I want to.
You gotta see it.
You must.
Have
You must have
You
hot dog
must.
fingers. I think that we are like the Stones, but we're gourds. I mean, it won't go in the direction that it goes.
Yeah.
But yeah.
We're the
the
Stones, but we're gourds.
Right, exactly. I think that's what I imagine. Let us be gourds. That's what we do.